my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and it is Thursday, so it means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. Flying solo on today's show. I had a couple of guests that I was trying to get on the show, just scheduling didn't work out. It was just one of those weird weeks, and it happens. But there's a lot to talk about. I'm just going to stick to the stories. No Ask a Gringo on today's show. I know I've been slacking when it comes to that. I didn't really finalize what I wanted to talk about until I kind of sat down. That's my own fault. So I apologize. Promise I'll do better next week. But we're going to get into a few things that are really interesting that have happened recently, or conversations that are happening. You had a really scary story here in Arizona where an Arizona man, I should say, actually had plans to commit a mass shooting in Atlanta at a Bad Bunny concert. So we'll talk a bit about that. I mean, it's politically motivated. Really scary stuff. Thankfully, I'll let you know, ahead of time that obviously, if it wasn't in the news yet, but thankfully this plan was foiled by the feds, the FBI. But really scary stuff. We'll also talk about how Latinos are far more likely to die on the job. And also, I kind of wanted to expound upon a discussion that I was having on social media at DJ Dramos. You want to follow me on Instagram. And just sort of talking about how it's all of our jobs to do something, right? And I know I've said this 1,000,001 times, but I wanted to keep sort of discussing it, and specifically talking about from the lens of all that's going on in Puerto Rico. There was a massive blackout that happened for the entire island, and it's just sort of more of the same of what's been going on. And there are just a couple things I wanted to sort of touch on in regards to that I think applied to anybody living life in any way, but sort of responding to some of the pushback I've gotten about people saying it's not the job of a celebrity, it's the job of a politician, all these different things. And I think this specific example of what's going on in Puerto Rico and what continues to happen is a great, I think, teachable moment of what potential solutions could be out there if we begin to start thinking outside of the norm. So that's what I want to touch on a bit. And then on Mi Gente segment, it is Pride Month. So I want to celebrate a few brands that are Latin-owned brands that are supporting Pride Month, that we can all sort of show love to this month. We'll do that for our Mi Gente segment. But first, let's get into the nonsense, the BS, and we'll do it in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, let's start in Atlanta, where there was a really just disgusting plan for a mass shooting at a Bad Bunny concert. So an Arizona man allegedly wanted to gun down black people at an Atlanta Bad Bunny concert in an attempt to spark a race war ahead of the presidential election, according to federal prosecutors. Mark Adams Puerto, 58 years old, was indicted on Tuesday, nearly a month after he was arrested. So he was arrested a month ago. The charges just came out, and now it's starting to get headlines. But he was indicted over the alleged plot, and he planned to murder as many black people as he could with semi-automatic rifles that he had bought through cash deals or trades to avoid detection from gun regulators. He was outed after a source he'd recruited to participate in the massacre notified FBI agents, leading to a months-long investigation that ended after he attempted to recruit an undercover agent to join the mass shooting, according to an affidavit obtained by NBC News. Quote, Puerto believes that martial law will be implemented shortly after the 2024 election and that a mass shooting should occur prior. This is what the source told the FBI in Phoenix, according to the affidavit, adding that, quote, he was ready to kill a bunch of people. Now, you already know my views on guns and the cancer that they are to our society. And this is another example. I mean, listen, thank God this man was dumb enough to try and recruit others to help him out. But if he wasn't, this might have actually happened. Think about it. He was able to get semi-automatic rifles through cash deals or trades. So he was able to go undetected. The only reason why anybody was even on his ass was because he was actively trying to recruit people and somebody ratted him out. And that's incredibly scary, right? To think how close or like the margin of error that is there. What if that person did not rat him out, right? What if that person was just as fucking crazy as him? What if he decided he was going to do this by himself and never even started recruiting? These are scary, scary prospects, right? And thank God it played out the way that it did. But it could have been a very different story and a very tragic one. And I think, again, as we continue to sort of beat a dead horse at this point, it's political extremism, right? It is people who have drank the Kool-Aid by the gallon at this point, right? And they're so invested in all that Trump has started that it's as if there's no going back, right? And I'm like, I paused for a second there because I hate to be pessimistic on things, but it's like, how do you talk sense into these people? Right? You can't. Anybody that is willing to go to this extreme to hurt innocent people for the sake of their political and racist agenda, there's probably no getting through to them, right? And I guess the only real thing you can do with stories like this one is sort of just point out what Donald Trump has created in this country. And obviously racism existed before him. It's going to exist long after him. But all of these sort of conspiracy theories about martial law and the outbreak of violence after the election and like these sort of end of world ideas, right? End of days ideas that there's going to be this civil war in this country and we're not going to have a country to go back to if Donald Trump doesn't win this election, essentially, right? And that there's going to be, mass hysteria in the streets and violence and like he said, martial law, essentially. These really extreme conspiracy theories. It creates a perfect storm for people who are obviously already not well in the head to then get activated to do crazy shit like this. And then when you have a country that has been very lax on guns and doesn't seem to want to do anything about them, this guy can go ahead and make cash purchases or trades and go undetected. Again, the only reason we're even talking about this, the only reason he was arrested was because he went and ran his mouth to other people. That's fucking scary. And it speaks to the importance of voting. Because the ideas on the right are getting more and more extreme. The idea and the poison that they're putting in people's head of like, we're at war basically, is activating the worst people. And that's what we have to be mindful of. That's why this election is so important. That's why if Donald Trump does, in fact, win the election, which is a possibility, it's only going to empower and embolden people like this even more. You know, who knows where this goes from there. So scared. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I never want to use fear tactics or anything like that, but this is what's going on. This is what's out there. And people are buying into the idea of there being so much chaos, political chaos, and this country being, you know, in turmoil and all these things that like they're running and coming up with crazy schemes based off of these conspiracy theories, right? Like this guy is believing that after the 2024 election, there's going to be martial law. Just, I'm literally don't even have like, you know, real things to sort of respond to. Like, I don't have a real opinion anymore. Things like this make me sad at this point. And by the way, martial law, just anybody that isn't familiar with the concept, martial law is the replacement of civilian government by military rule and the suspension of civilian legal processes for military powers. So his belief system is that we basically aren't going to have any rights after the 2024 election, and the military is going to be in charge. Basic democracy is over. And I mean, maybe he's half right if Trump actually does win the election. But again, just scary fucking stuff, man. Scary stuff. Moving on. Latinos are far more likely to die on the job. Depressing as well. Now, this is an article from Project Pulso. And I'm reading from their social media. It was like an Instagram post they had posted about. But they said, when a 300-foot container ship destroyed Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge, 6 people died. All were construction workers and all were Latino. The tragedy is indicative of a much larger trend in the U.S., wherein Latino employees are far more likely to work and die in more dangerous environments than their counterparts in other racial and ethnic groups. According to a study conducted by the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, 1,248 Latinos died on the job in 2022, 60% of whom were immigrants. The group with the second highest risk of death at work was black employees, 734 of whom died in the same year. Latinos' rate of death increased 24% over the previous decade. Now they're saying one of the most important contributing factors to these horrible statistics is that Latinos are far more likely to work in hazardous, under-regulated sectors. By far, the most dangerous trade is construction, which accounts for 31% of all Latino deaths at work. Approximately 30% of the U.S. construction workforce is Latino, though. In states like Texas and Florida, that number is 61% and 37%, respectively. Texas and Florida are also at the forefront of banning protective measures for outdoor workers. Both states recently passed laws nullifying local ordinances mandating water and shade breaks for employees in construction, grounds maintenance, and agriculture. These last two sectors reported the third, 67 workers, and fourth, 43 workers, highest Latino death rates. And I'm stuttering on that last sentence because I'm like, I want to just go in. I'm not here to spread conspiracy theories, but let's talk about this. States like Texas and Florida, which have been very outspoken about their anti-immigrant beliefs, have put forth measures banning put forth bans on protective measures for outdoor workers. Let's put our thinking cap on for a second here, right? Protective measures for outdoor workers. So measures put in place to protect the lives of those who are vulnerable especially in places like Texas and Florida, where it's incredibly hot to work outside and dangerously hot, right? And by the way, this whole week, we're in a heat wave in the New York City area, right? There's been all kinds of like warnings about it. And we're at like 90-something degrees. In the middle of summer in places like Florida and Texas, that's the norm, right? But we're being told this week, like take care of ourselves. Don't be outside too long. Keep your pets indoors. All the above, right? Air quality alerts. These people in Texas and Florida have to work in these conditions for months at a time. So logically speaking, in a country that cares about people, in society as human beings, we want to keep people safe, right? Why then would you want to ban protective measures? Like, what's the logic behind banning protective measures? It's one of two things. Because there's no normal, healthy, rational explanation for wanting to ban protective measures, which, by the way, include mandating water and shade breaks for employees. Basic things. It's hot, you need water, you need breaks. You need to get out of the sun for a little bit. There's no, again, logical reason to ban these things. So the reasons have to be far more sinister, unfortunately. And it's one of two things. Either you are doing this for the big companies that are behind these construction projects, these ground maintenance and agriculture, because it means they can work their employees for far more hours straight and theoretically produce more, right? Which then helps them and their profits. Or the other side of that coin is, you know that these are jobs heavily worked by immigrants, by brown people, and you've already put on display your disdain for immigrants. So this is another means of punishing and dehumanizing immigrants. Those are your only two options. And to be quite honest, it's probably a combination of the two. And again, the fact that, dude, why isn't this front page news? The fact that states are trying to ban protective measures for workers who are working in extreme conditions. There's something incredibly sinister at play. And again, it is politicians playing political games at the expense of the lives of people. And I know the other side, because I'm already thinking, like, I post this clip on Instagram, the reaction, well, if they didn't come here illegally, this wouldn't be a problem. That's your first instinct. Your first instinct is another human being is suffering and could suffer, but the government is trying to not do anything to protect them from suffering. And your first instinct is to say, well, they shouldn't be here in the first place. Even if that is your political ideology, as a human being, your first instinct should say, this is fucking wrong. Regardless of what I feel about immigration, I'm a human being first. So I should be able to first and foremost look at that, regardless of what side of the aisle I fall on, and say, that's not right. You're putting lives at risk unnecessarily. There's literally no reason to justify it. But we live in a world where your political ideology supersedes your humanity. And that's normal. People will go on social media and publicly let you know that. They have no shame in that. Right? I think I posted and talked about in Arizona, they were trying to pass a bill where people can, legally like gun down people crossing the border over their property. And you had people publicly coming out and saying, I got to move to Arizona. You're talking about wanting to move somewhere so that you can take another human being's life legally. But we've gotten to the point of extremism where our political ideology, our political, affiliation supersedes the fact that we're a human being first. And that's a scary fucking place to be. And moving on in this article, they say Latinos in general and Latino immigrants specifically are frequently maligned for, quote, stealing jobs. However, nuestra gente is often forced to take the most dangerous work no one else wants to do, and our disproportionate number of workplace deaths is just the most heartbreaking indicator of that fact. And another great point. They're taking our jobs. They're taking our jobs. I don't see many of you lining up to go work in the field in these extreme conditions. That's why those jobs are available to them. Or corporations that are refusing to pay a fair wage. That's why those jobs are available to them. Because, unfortunately, this is a means to an end. They have very few other options. It's just, again, the lack of humanity will never cease to amaze me. Genuinely. And maybe that's something I need to get over, but I also feel like the day that it doesn't bother me means I've become cold and dead inside and lack all the humanity that I'm accusing these people of not having. But it is frustrating. Now, we'll take a quick break here, and then we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and I want to just touch on something quickly. I had posted a couple things. I was, last week I was driving home. I was about to get in the car, and I was like, what was I even doing? Oh, it was in New York, and I went to an event, and I was stopped and grabbed some pizza, and I was just sitting outside eating. And I was going through my phone, and I kept seeing these posts about Puerto Rico. And there was just a massive blackout that literally the entire island lost power overnight, basically. And this is a frequent problem happening throughout the island of Puerto Rico. They've privatized the electricity to a company called Luma, who is price gouging people, but also providing subpar service. And it's affecting the quality of life of people. I mean, you've had people dying from this, because they're, on respirators or whatever it might be. The power goes out, and unfortunately they don't have a generator. They can't afford it. And the electricity they need to survive is not there, right? People have lost loved ones. And at the very, very least, obviously not as extreme, but people also, their personal property getting damaged by power surges, right? And the power constantly going on and off. We have a family home in Puerto Rico, and we've lost thousands of dollars in air conditioners and TVs and other electronics because the power surges that happen. We lose power and then it comes back on. To the point that now, when no one is there, we shut the power off completely for the entire house to try to avoid this problem, right? And again, compared to death, that's nothing. What I'm saying is that people of Puerto Rico are suffering, though. And if you don't have money to replace these things, it is a big deal, right? If you do lose your air conditioner, if you, lose the one television you have in the house, these are things that shouldn't happen to people, especially when they're paying higher prices for their electrical bill than we are here in the States, but being provided a subpar service, right? So my sort of vantage point on this, because the government, unfortunately, is corrupt, and obviously somebody's getting a kickback somewhere to allow this to happen, right? Because they do have a trade commission, a consumer, I think it's Consumer Affairs board, or I'm fucking up the name, but basically a board that's supposed to oversee making sure that companies aren't taking advantage of their consumers, right? Consumers from the island. Nobody is doing anything, right? Nobody is saying, what is going on that we're paying this much money, but the service is awful. Nobody is trying to hold them accountable for nobody's doing anything, basically, right? Nobody is looking into this. Obviously, there's some corruption happening at a higher level. And my vantage point is always this. In a utopian, perfect, amazing society, yes, the government would do its job, and they would be the ones that we have to report to as far as like, hey, what's going on? You need to fix this. But here in the real world, unfortunately, they're not doing all that they can do. They're not causing a stink the way they should with this company, Luma. So I take the perspective of what are our resources as regular people, as citizens, as descendants of a place like Puerto Rico. Our greatest resource is the fact that we actually have a surplus of people like the Bad Bunnies of the world or the Daddy Yankees or whomever that are extremely wealthy, well-connected, and have gigantic platforms, right? And there's so much power within that. And I always lean on, why not have these people who have been blessed, especially somebody like Bad Bunny, with a generational level of influence? He holds the island of Puerto Rico in the palm of his hand, basically. I want more from him because this is a unprecedented blessing to have that much influence, and it's a waste if it only happens via music, right? Or if it's, these very short term solutions of charities and things like that. There's so much power that this man holds, and I would love to see him step up to the plate. And for me, this is tough love. This isn't I'm not shitting on this human being. I think he's done a lot, more than probably any other artist. But for me, you can't go to the protests, you can't speak up, and then also be like, oh, but I'm an artist, I'm not a politician, so I that's my excuse to fall back. You've already put yourself out there as an activist, right? If that wasn't the case, then you can be a Mark Anthony or a Jennifer Lopez, who for the most of their career stays out of these things and they just put out music and they truly are just artists at the end of the day, right? But for somebody like Bad Bunny, you've already begun to put yourself out there as somebody who cares about what happens on the island. On top of that, you mean more of the island than these people do. To me, you have a responsibility, right? And I think all of us have a responsibility in general. If you believe in God, you believe that we're all God's children. That means that we're all brothers and sisters, essentially, right? In God. So just like if your brother or sister in the real sense came to you and were in trouble, you would probably rush to help them. We also need to have some level of empathy in a similar fashion to all of those around us. Understanding that we're all, basically the other side of the coin. We're all connected in some sort of way. I talk about this a lot. We're a tribe. We're a neighbor. Doesn't matter if you believe in God or not. We're all connected. The fucking fish in the ocean, we're all sharing this thing called planet Earth together. All of us are connected. Everything we do affects something else on this planet, right? The carbon monoxide from us driving cars and all these things, and the emissions that are happening like that, we're all affecting the quality of life for the animals and the natural resources in this planet, right? We're destroying it, basically. We all have an effect on each other, whether we want to admit it or not. We're all in this together. Therefore, to me, it's all of our jobs to want to help and make things better when we can with what we have. And certain people have a lot, right? So for me, it's like, I look at these things and I'm like, how do we as the people fight back if the powers that be are not doing their jobs, And this is my proposal. I'm just going to throw this out there into the universe because I was like, where are the lawyers who want to get creative and figure out what we can do? Because, yes, Luma has a contract with Puerto Rico to be the service provider, right? And that's what they're doing. And there's a lot of, red tape involved in all of these things. But if we want them out, then you have to hit them where it hurts. These corporate companies, the only God that they answer to is green. It's money. So, and I was listening to this podcast the other day, and they were talking about gun violence and the families of like Sandy Hook, who that horrific mass shooting that happened at the elementary school in Connecticut. Now, obviously, the government, and I'm using this as an example, our government has not done enough when it comes to gun safety, gun violence. So while they're not doing anything, these parents have banded together and are filing class action lawsuits against the gun manufacturers, right? So there's two different ones going on right now by the same lawyer, or one happened, one settled. The one in Connecticut that was connected to the Sandy Hook shooting. He's now gone to Uvalde, Texas, and they're filing a similar lawsuit. But basically, the gun industry, unlike most other consumer industries, doesn't have to answer for the carnage that happens as a result of their products being, of their products, right? Car companies, like if I'm driving a car and God forbid it were to blow up, they would have a liability like, Honda, if something happened with the car. Gun companies don't have a similar liability. They're off the hook because of laws. But what this lawyer did was he got creative, and I believe gun companies can't advertise similar to like how cigarette companies can't advertise. But what gun companies have been doing, and I might be conflating the two stories, but essentially the argument that was being made here was the gun that was used in the Sandy Hook shooting was actually a gun that was found in the game Call of Duty. And what he was able to trace back was the gun manufacturer actually paid to get that gun in the game Call of Duty. And the person who did the shooting in Sandy Hook was an avid player of the game of Call of Duty. So the correlation he made was that gun company was actually marketing to this person. And as a result, since they're not supposed to be marketing, they are responsible for what that person went out and did, essentially, right? He was able to make some sort of correlation. I'm giving you like a very abridged version of it. You can look into this yourself if you want. I think the podcast, is it The Daily? I think it's The Daily or it's the Washington Post podcast. One of them did like an in-depth episode about it. You can listen to it. But basically, they got creative with this lawsuit, and they ended up, settling out of court. There's a payout. Now he's going to do the same thing in Uvalde. But the point being this: you hit these companies where it hurts. If the government is not stepping in, right? In this case, it's when it comes to guns. You hit the companies directly where it hurts, in their pockets. You bleed them dry financially because they don't want. That's literally the worst case scenario for them. So my argument is, when you have a company like Luma in Puerto Rico, if people like Bad Bunny or Daddy Yankee or whomever created a fund where they each said, we're going to put X amount of dollars into a like people's fund, and with that fund, we now hire attorneys to create all types of lawsuits against this company, Luma, with the intention of, we're going to bleed them dry until they tap out and say, enough is enough, we need to get out of here. It's not worth it for us anymore. And that is the power that these celebrities have, because they can fundraise, they have money themselves, and they have connections and a way of getting the message out there to millions and millions of people around the world. And I'm sorry, but when you have a platform, you have a responsibility. You can accept it or not, but you have a responsibility. If you want to be a good human being, you do what you can. That's my point of view on all of these different things. And I think, and I even went even further, where I was talking about just different examples I throw out there. Bad Bunny has a deal with Adidas. He has a sneaker coming out. It's called the San Juan sneaker. San Juan is the capital of Puerto Rico. My suggestion is, okay, you have Adidas making money off of our culture. I'm not going to say exploiting, but sure. Why not say to Adidas, hey, since we're doing a sneaker literally called the San Juan sneaker, why don't you guys do some sort of charitable effort for the people of San Juan? Something. And I brought up the fact that it's like 44% of public schools in Puerto Rico have closed since 2007. I said, here's an idea if I was on Bad Bunny's team. How about Adidas opens a school in San Juan or renovates an existing one? How amazing would that be for it's a win-win for everybody involved. It's great PR and press for Adidas. Bad Bunny is doing right by his people. The people of San Juan are getting something in return for their culture being used for profit. And Adidas and Bad Bunny are going to sell a hell of a lot of sneakers. And it's a tax write-off for Adidas at the end of the day. It's literally, it's a marketing scheme. It's a commercial. Use your commercial budget for that. You film it, you document it. It's the greatest commercial you could ever ask for. Why is it that Bad Bunny or someone on his team is not thinking that way? Again, this is low effort stuff. We're talking about a company that's worth how many $1 billion probably. A celebrity who's worth millions and millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars. This is very low effort for people like them. And the mere fact that they're not thinking that way is what bothers me. Why is your head not immediately going there with all that you have? And again, I use him as an example because he's the most glaring example. He's the best example we have. But it is a societal issue, and it's obvious by the people that sort of run to defend why he doesn't have to get involved. Because you have people from Puerto Rico in my comments like, defending him, and it's like, man, you would benefit from what I'm saying. I had somebody say to me, you know how much money he's brought to the local economy with the concerts he does? Bro, you understand he's not playing those concerts for free. Yes, the local economy is making money from that with parking and the venue and everything that comes along with it. Travel. Guess what? Bad Bunny is making a ton of money off of those ticket sales, the merchandise, and everything in between. Like, we're letting people off the hook and acting as if they're doing, we pretend people are doing us a favor. Meanwhile, they're lining their pockets, at the same time. What are we talking about? Think bigger. Demand more. Want better. Why are we accepting the bare minimum? Yes, he has done a tremendous amount of bringing awareness for the island of Puerto Rico, but he could do more, right? Shit, it's an election year. Somebody like Bad Bunny could get a sit down with President Biden. I'm sure the Biden administration would love this shit to try to get the Latino vote behind them. Get a sit down and say, hey, what are we doing about the infrastructure in Puerto Rico? The blackouts that have been happening. This is a massive problem. Bring attention on an international level. Get Biden to try to commit to some sort of plan. Call out the government and that company at the highest level in front of the President of the United States. Why is somebody like him not thinking that way? It's the same, people are obsessed with celebrity, even politicians. It's the world that we live in, so why not use that celebrity for good, right? Somebody like Kim Kardashian proved this when she sat down with Donald Trump and had that woman exonerated. Bro, once you're at a certain level of celebrity status and access, you just appearing somewhere is a tremendous asset to so many people. Again, even the President of the United States. Why is nobody thinking that way? Dude, I have all the access in the world. If I was Bad Bunny, I'm thinking, what can I do with this moment? Because it's not going to last forever. If I truly give a fuck about my people, how can I now take advantage of it, right? And again, he's done a lot. But we live in a very self-serving society. And this is why people like Bob Marley are revered, right? Because Bob Marley wasn't necessarily a materialistic person. He was somebody who spoke about the underdogs, who put on concerts for love and unity, right? Bring both sides together in Jamaica during a very violent time in the country. He was somebody who didn't want to flaunt his wealth because he was understanding that he had a bigger purpose here than being some celebrity. And that's why he's revered as if I'm not mistaken, almost like a prophet in Rastafarian culture. I'm sorry, but I want more. If you've been blessed with so much and you care about the world and your fellow man, I expect you to do more. Because there are people on the ground boots on the ground, doing shit with absolutely no resource whatsoever other than word of mouth. You should be participating. We all should be participating in some sort of way. And by the way, I'm putting my money where my mouth is because it's easy for me to sit behind this microphone and say these things, right? Today I'm actually going to go to a rally that's happening outside the United Nations in New York City for Puerto Rican independence. So I'm trying to get involved. I'm trying to do what I can do as well. I don't want to be somebody who just sits here and talks. I think we all have a part to play about the things that we care about. Now, with that said, on to some positivity for our Mi Gente segment. But first, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. Mi Gente. All right, so it is Pride Month. Very, very special and important time of year for people to feel seen, to feel safe, to understand that they can be whoever they are and not feel shame about it and not feel like their life or safety is at risk, right? I'm actually going to be DJing the Pride March in New York City on Sunday, June 30th. I'll be there on the iHeartRadio float. So if you're around, wave to me. I'll be over there DJing. But We Are Me Too did a really great sort of compilation of Latine brands and entrepreneurs who are helping celebrate Pride Month and are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And I'm just going to shout out a few of them. So you have a brand called, I love this name, A Tribe Called Queer, which is a Los Angeles-based community organization focusing on empowering BIPOC, I always fuck up that word, BIPOC and LGBTQ plus communities. They aim to create safe spaces and affirm identities through mental wellness, art, education, and more. I absolutely love this so much. I think that's what a great cause, like mental wellness and all these things. A Tribe Called Queer. I'll put the link to this article in the show notes so you can go ahead and follow them. Looks like their Instagram is just A Tribe Called Queer if you want to follow. You have Scary Good Coffee. It is an LGBTQ plus owned brand. They say they're realizing that the coffee industry lacks of inclusivity and representation, especially for women and minorities. Nancy Alvarez established Scary Good Coffee to deliver fresh, complex coffee to homes. Absolutely just love to see this. Now you have JZD, which is a company founded by Jen and Vero, which is that's their names, Jen and Vero, and they started a lifestyle brand in 2016 to celebrate Latina culture and community empowerment. Started with the iconic pink Latina power tee, symbolizing the strength and representation of Latinas everywhere. They're saying despite initial struggles, the brand grew through its strong community focus and leveraging social media to connect and expand. They create products that resonate with cultural roots and stories, ensuring their community's input in every launch. Today, JZD is a thriving queer Latino-owned business dedicated to celebrating Cultura and empowering individuals by reminding them of their inherent power and ancestral support. Love that. There's so many brands on this list. I mean, I can't read all of them. Actually, big shout out to one of the ones I have here, Coco and Breezy Eyewear. Coco and Breezy are really dope. They are twin sisters who have this beautiful eye company, like eyeglasses and or sunglasses more than anything. I think they did a collab with Prince actually when he was still alive. But they're like luxury eyewear. They're actually really dope DJs. If I'm not mistaken, they're actually Puerto Rican and black. And I interviewed them like years ago when I was with the Breakfast Club for our YouTube channel. But they're really dope, and they're also DJs, like I said, and producers. They do a lot of like house music, and the idea of like how people of color have been left out of the conversation around house music, even though it's black people who created it, essentially, right? So they're trying to bring that narrative. Like I said, they're both they're twins, obviously. They're half Puerto Rican and black, and I believe they are, if I'm not mistaken, I think they're bisexual, so they're part of the LGBTQ plus community. They unapologetically speak about that kind of stuff. So just beautiful things like this. I mean, let me see if I can read a few more on this list here. You have Gro Mija, Lana Galvez, a queer Latinx illustrator based in Houston, and she provides art that represents and affirms her own worth, which is just amazing. You have the Queer Gym, founded by Coach Nat, America's first fitness center dedicated to providing a safe and inclusive space for the LGBTQ plus community. The Queer Gym. I'd love to see that. You have Smile Cult, which is a lifestyle brand based in LA, creates apparel and goodies for individuals in their healing era. Aren't we all? I'd love to see that. Another company is Barrio Drive, an immigrant-owned brand that advocates for marginalized voices through fashion, art, and storytelling. You have Undaku Lawyer. Now, this is a law firm founded by Miss Iraski. What is it? Raskwi? I apologize. I'm butchering this name. Miss Iraskoki Morales. And specializes in the intersection of business, tax, and employment law, mainly focusing on the impacts of immigration status on entrepreneurial endeavors. Fucking amazing, man. That's a lawyer. Amazing. You have a Little Barn Coffee House, co-owned by Celeste Diaz and Joanna Rubio, opened in Los Angeles in July 2020. They are lifelong vegans and partners for 15 years, transforming the space themselves during the pandemic to offer vegan versions of traditional meals. Amazing, amazing stuff. Again, I kind of just went quickly through that list because there's a bunch, but I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to support these businesses this month or any month, honestly. I think, particularly in our community where I think a lot of the conversation around LGBTQ hasn't been the most positive. We've been a bit closed-minded. I love to see brands that are Latino-owned, and are supporting, our LGBTQ plus community as they should. So just beautiful stuff. Again, I'll put the link in the show notes. Go check these companies out. And with that said, we're going to tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, so I'm like losing my voice. I feel like I've been just passionately talking. I was also having a discussion with my dad last night in the car, and we both tend to just start getting really passionate. So my voice is getting shot from all of the above. But this Arizona man who wanted to gun down black people at a Bad Bunny concert in Atlanta, again, it's a scary reminder of the time that we live in and the polarization that's happening, the conspiracy theories, the just stirring of the pot that is happening from the Republican Party and the real world consequences that sadly could happen with the rhetoric that they're putting out there. Again, this didn't happen because this guy was recruiting other people and one of them ratted him out. Otherwise, the FBI had no idea this guy was buying guns, buying semi-automatic rifles through cash deals, and was planning on carrying this out. It's scary stuff, and this is why all these things matter. Latinos are far more likely to die on the job. I mean, just a really sad article. Again, the thing that really stuck out to me is states like Texas and Florida trying to take away the protective measures that have been instilled to make sure these people are safe when working in these really horrendous conditions of working outside. Again, it shows their racism. It shows the anti-immigrant feelings that they have, and that they're willing to weaponize things for the sake of staying in office. Weaponize lives, I should say, not things, people's lives for the sake of staying in office, and a scary reminder of that. And then just sort of the conversation I continue to have around, things that are happening in Puerto Rico, and I think just our collective responsibility. I just want us to be motivated to help one another, man. The world would be a far better place if poverty didn't exist. And I know that's like this, grandiose utopian idea that isn't a reality, or can't be a reality, as they say, so they say. But really think about that. Think about, if you want to think about how things affect all of us, if large numbers of people weren't suffering, crime would almost probably not be a thing, right? Yeah, it would still exist, but not at the rate that it happens now. And what do we end up doing? Instead of actually solving the real disease, we put band-aids, we over-police, we arrest people at higher rates. Instead of saying, hey, if we actually put some money into these communities and tried to tackle poverty as a whole, people probably wouldn't need to resort to illegal measures to survive. Just a thought. And again, if all of us did that affects all of us, right? So if communities that are marginalized, that are suffering, people that are suffering, poverty-stricken people are being helped, it then expands into all of us having a better quality of life, where crime is less, right? and we can sleep a little better at night knowing so. Like, again, it's stuff like that affects all of us. We just have to give a damn. And lastly, you know, when I talked about these brands celebrating LGBTQ, these LGBTQ plus founded brands celebrating Pride Month, and not even celebrating Pride Month, but taking a moment to celebrate these brands for Pride Month, I think is amazing. You know, these Latin-owned brands that are, many of the ones I mentioned are founded by members of the LGBTQ plus community, or are, you know, doing their part to spread awareness and love. I just think is such a beautiful, beautiful thing that needs to continue. And again, it's all of us doing our part for a better world, a world where people don't have to hide who they are, where they don't have to feel like their safety is in danger because of who they are. And I think that is something we all should be striving for. A world that exists like that, I think, is one that is far healthier for all of us. So just some things to look at. Again, I'll put the link to those brands in the show notes if you want to check them out, support them. And that's it, man. Everybody have an amazing weekend. I will catch you on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Till then, stay safe. We'll talk soon. Peace.